Hola, buenas tardes. Estoy muy feliz de estar aquí en Chile. Hace más que 20 años pasé varios meses aquí viajando por el país y conocí tanta buena gente y me disfrutó mucho. Pues estoy muy feliz de estar aquí, es maravilloso. Pero por el bien de todo, voy a cambiar en inglés por exponer. Bueno. My name is Dana Gunders, and for the past 15 years, I have been obsessed with the amount of food that we waste. This makes going out to dinner with me very awkward because inevitably, just as happened to me last night, there's too much food on the plate, people can't finish it, and they feel like they have to apologize to me for not eating the food. And speaking of apologizing, I have to apologize because I know I'm the last person tonight, right before dinner, and I'm going to be talking about food the whole time. So please forgive me. And I know that wasting food is a kind of simple and ordinary topic compared with a lot of the AI and quantum physics and philosophy we've been hearing about. And in fact, it's one of the reasons I like working on this problem, because it's something that you can go home and do something about today. And at the same time, it's actually quite big. In fact, 1 billion meals go uneaten every single day. That's 1/3 of all the food in our whole food supply, and it's $1 trillion worth of uneaten food. It's enough food to feed one meal to every person on the planet who faces hunger every single day. And it takes a huge amount of resources to produce that food. Imagine a farm. If all of the food we don't eat were grown in one place, it would take a farm the size of the United States. That's 12 times the size of Chile. And it would use as much water as the whole country. We would grow food all year long, and when we went to go harvest it, it would fill trucks. In fact, it would fill 100 semi-trucks every minute all year long. Except instead of going somewhere for that food to be eaten, those trucks would go straight to a landfill where they would rot, the food would rot, and it would produce methane, a powerful greenhouse gas. In fact, wasted food around the world has 5 times the greenhouse gas impact of the entire aviation industry. Now, I know people don't, finish half a sandwich, leave a little bit on their plate, and think, oh my gosh, what about those climate emissions? So let me take a minute to explain why wasted food has such a big impact. There are really 3 reasons. First, landfills. When food goes to the landfill, it rots, it produces methane, and landfills are actually the 3rd largest source of methane in the world. And at least in the US, about 60% of the methane is coming from food rotting in those landfills. Because of this, what this means is that this makes wasting less food a very immediate climate solution. So different from other solutions that feel very far out and in the future, this is one that if you go home, throw less food out today, that's less food going to the landfill next week and less methane the week after. So that's the first reason. But in fact, as big as landfill methane is, it's actually dwarfed by the amount of fuel and energy and resources it takes to grow food, to harvest it, store it, transport it, and get it to our tables. And all of that goes to waste when we waste the food. The third reason is actually even bigger, and that is land use. We are looking ahead at a future where experts predict we will need about 50% more food in 2050 than we had in 2010. And the question is, where is that food going to come from? Are we going to pave down more rainforests and convert it to agriculture, or are we going to use the food that we are already growing? Experts estimate that we could meet over 20% of our future food needs by simply wasting less food. Now,
I've always thought this is just such a silly problem, right? Like one of the dumbest problems in the world. Nobody wakes up wanting to waste food. No businesses want to waste food. So why is it happening? Well, there really are so many different reasons because it looks very different for a farm of blueberries here in Chile versus, say, a market in Africa. But just to give you a sense of some of the reasons, in some places, food is relatively cheap, and waste fees are cheap as well, so there's not a lot of incentive. In other places, there's just not infrastructure to keep food cold. Almost everywhere, we don't measure how much food is going to waste, and that makes it very difficult to manage it. It's also hard to predict demand for food. And nobody ever wants to run out, right? And you don't want to run out if you're a restaurant or if you're hosting an asado. So there's always a tendency to overbuy. And then there's, of course, the complication that food goes bad, unlike other products that people need to manage. The good news is that it is a solvable problem. It doesn't take rocket science, and many of the solutions are actually common sense. There's a lot we can do in our own lives, and there's also a lot we can do in the supply chain. At my organization, ReFed, we are entirely focused on reducing the amount of food that goes to waste. And we have identified over 80 solutions to the problem. I don't have time to go into all of them here, but they really boil down to a few things. First, let's prevent food from going to waste. Let's prevent having extra food in the first place. So this might mean harvesting fruits and vegetables that are maybe the wrong color or the wrong shape or too small. It might mean that a restaurant makes their menu smaller so that they don't have to carry as much inventory. Or it might mean, more high tech. It might be a special kind of imaging that can look into strawberries and predict how long the strawberries will last to help a distributor decide if they should ship it close or ship it far away. Prevention solutions tend to save the most money, and they also have the best bang for buck environmentally as well. But when we can't prevent the extra food from happening, then we should think about donating it and getting it to people in need. And if that's not possible, then we want to think about solutions to recycle it. And that could be feeding it to animals. It could be feeding it to insects, that then those insects get fed to animals. It could be composting it, making energy, or, and yes, this is actually happening, it could be making t-shirts out of it. So many solutions, and there's actually just an explosion of innovation happening out there. These are just some of the companies that we are tracking and working with in the US that are providing some kind of solution for the topic. Let me give you a sense, because some of these are really working well. This first one, not from the US, this is from Nigeria, and this is a company called Cold Hubs. They provide solar-powered cold storage and markets across Nigeria. And in doing so, they give farmers the ability to store their food for longer, and therefore they can get a better price for their food. They have about 58 of these across Nigeria right now, and they've saved over 3,000 tons of food, and the farmers' incomes have gone up 60%. More high-tech, there's a company called Afresh. They use AI to help grocery stores better predict demand. And pilots have shown that they cut waste in fresh produce by about 14%. And in fact, since those pilots, this technology has been rolled out across some of the biggest grocery chains in the US. Or another one is Too Good To Go. It's an app on your phone that restaurants can use to sell product at a discount at the end of the night when they just have a little bit left. That app is now in 17 countries and saved over 100 million meals last year alone. But not everything's high tech. There's also really kind of low tech solutions as well. One of the biggest food service companies in the world, named Compass, They're doing kind of boring things like tracking waste, putting things in smaller bowls on the buffets, or offering different sized portions. And they have actually found that this is cutting up to 50% waste in some of their locations. Or sometimes it's just about talking to your employees. There's a flour company called Bob's Red Mill. They asked their employees for suggestions, held a contest, and the first one they tried to implement saved 70% of the grain that was going to waste on that line. And what was the suggestion? It was tightening a screw more often. So as you can see, some solutions are high-tech, some are low, many are win-win, and they're working. In fact, in some places, they're really working. In the UK, they have reduced their waste overall by 27%. And Japan, Netherlands have also had a lot of success. In the US, we recently had great success with a group of grocery stores on the West Coast who had a collaboration together, and after 4 years of collaborating, were able to reduce their waste by 25%. And in doing so, they decreased the amount of sales that they lost by 8%, and they decreased the greenhouse gas footprint of their wasted food by 30%. In fact, it was so successful that we've now expanded the project to be a national one. So there are some great examples out there, and they're showing us what's possible, but it's not enough, and it's not fast enough. In fact, companies and countries have signed on to a sustainable development goal from the United Nations to cut food loss and waste in half by 2030. The impacts of achieving this would be enormous. It would avoid converting land area the size of Argentina into agriculture. And in doing so, that would avoid biodiversity losses from that land being cleared by about 1/3. And in addition to that, it could avoid greenhouse gases equivalent to taking all the cars off the road in the US and Canada combined. So the size of this prize is enormous, but despite pockets of progress, overall we are not moving the needle. So the question is, what can we do? Well, first, governments. Governments need to set the stage and really frame the context for working on this problem. They can set and enforce national targets. In fact, in the EU, they are currently moving forward a legislation that will require grocery stores, restaurants, and households to jointly reduce their waste by 30%. Governments, so that's just one example. But setting targets can be very effective. We also would love to see governments putting food loss and waste in their NDCs. These are the plans that countries are coming up with to meet their climate goals and their climate commitments. And by putting food loss and waste into that plan, it can unlock funding that can help achieve some of the goals. Governments can also provide incentives through tax benefits or otherwise for prevention and for donation. And they can ban food from landfills. Currently, Ecuador, Japan, 10 states in the US have banned food from landfills. And instead, they are building infrastructure so that it can be composted and so that compost can then go back to the soil and make the soil healthier as well. And that's a legislation that we are seeing spreading around the world quite quickly right now. And then, of course, there's infrastructure needs that can be funded as well. So that's governments. What about food businesses? Food businesses play such a key role in this. They can start by just measuring. We work with a lot of supermarkets in the US. It's been so surprising to see that many of them don't even know how much food they waste. And when they start to measure it, they're able to really identify where they can make progress. businesses can also just double down on best practices. A lot of this is common sense and simple steps and things that businesses already want their employees to be doing. Just making sure their employees really are doing that is the key step, which gets to the next one, which is really engaging employees, right? It's the people who handle the food that we need to actually want to do this work. There's also new solutions that can be tried. Some of them are tech solutions, some are new food products, some are packaging innovations, but a lot of new solutions that food businesses can play a key role in trying. And then there is a place for these joint industry collaborations that can help businesses work together and solve some of these problems jointly. And then let's not forget about us, right? We at home are a huge part of the problem. In fact, one of my favorite bumper stickers on a car is, "Hate traffic? You are traffic." Well, we are also part of the problem. And there are a lot of steps that we can take at home to make a difference. And I'll get to those in a second, but first I want to tell you what not to do. So you are going to go out into the world now, and you are going to see food being wasted everywhere, and you're going to want to eat it. Let me tell you, this is not the way to solve the problem. We cannot eat our way out of it. Instead, we need to manage our food better. So what can we do? We can plan and shop carefully. Shopping is really where we commit to the food. So being very careful with what we buy is a very important step. We need to store food properly, take the time to wrap it or close it. Learn what the date labels on food mean. You have expiration dates here in Chile, and I think you also have a minimum duration date. And those dates often really are estimating quality, but not telling you that the food is bad after those dates. So make sure that you smell the food, taste it. If it's fine, it's probably okay to eat. Freeze your food. Your freezer is like a magic pause button. And you can freeze things that are a day or two old. You can freeze bread. You can freeze cheese. You can freeze pasta. A lot of things that we don't think to freeze can just go right in the freezer and come on out. And then, lastly, a word that I just learned while here in Chile this time, and I'm going to take it all over the world, I promise you, lumami. How many of you have heard of lumami? All right. So I have learned, in case you haven't, it's lu for lunes, ma for martes, mi for miércoles, and then on jueves you make dinner from the food from those 3 nights, lumami. So I love it, and I'm going to take it everywhere. So as you can see, a lot of this is just common sense. And I just encourage you, as we think about these big problems of the future and all of the big kind of technology and all these needs and things that we can create, to also just think about some of the solutions that are right in front of us that we can do today. And in Chile, I know you're already thinking of it. You have lumami. It's part of your culture. I know Chile can be a leader. I know Chile has introduced many of the legislations that could have an impact if they were passed, and I just encourage you all and the country to be leaders on this topic and to help, feed us, feed those in need, and meet our climate goals while also saving money at the same time in doing so. So thank you very much. Hope you all have a great dinner. And muchísimas gracias.